3 months ago marked the second anniversary of the protest in Tahrir Square. For 6 decades, Egypt has gone through three leaders under its prior constitution. In the 70s, Egypt proved itself to be a power nation, but failed when dealing with class divisions. It had an advance in foreign policy, but failed economically with proof in the 1977 bread riots. After the death of his predecessor, Mubarak made an attempt to lower aggression emitting from the lower class, but his adamant attention became his father. The revolution on the 27th of January was no surprise as multiple citizens protested his rule. With a peaceful protest organized by revolutionaries in their 20s, change was made. With the use of Facebook, the youth of Egypt was able to remove Mubarak. After 2 years, Egypt has implemented a new constitution, and though some may find dissatisfaction, only the future can tell.
Thank you, Samad. Now let me tell you a little bit about Iran. Safavid era is important to Iranian history. It happened from 6th century to 18th century. This is where Persia converted to Shia Muslim and left Sunni Muslim behind. This caused a conflict between the Ottoman Empire and the Persian Empire, but the Persian Empire became what is modern day Iran. Then you have the Qajar dynasty, which brings me to imperialism. Russia and England had taken westernizing Iran into what it looks like now. They had a lot of input and stripped it from many of its natural resources. They had a constitutional revolution. They installed a constitutional revolution. They created a constitution, elected their own officials. Russia wasn't gaining anything from this, so they launched the coup and installed a monarchy with Reza Shah. Reza Shah's regime lasted till about World War II until he was taken out of power, or he was forced to give up the throne just because he was aligning with Nazi Germany at that time, which created a constitutional monarchy. Prime ministers were elected. This elected prime minister. This is where prime ministers were elected, which the election of Razamara was a great one until he got assassinated, which then led to the election of Mossadegh. Mossadegh then nationalized oil policy, and then that led to the overthrow of his government, and then installing the son of Reza Shah, who is Reza Shah Pahlavi. This then was an oppressive regime, which led to the revolution of 1979. All the people of Iran weren't satisfied with that government. It later became known as the Islamic Revolution. The clerics were the only ones that were really organized, and they seized power. And of course, seeing that since the 16th century they had that kind of moral code, it was easy for them to continue with it. So they proceeded with it until the spring, the Arab Spring, which happened recently. They tried to assemble, but it was noticeable that they were going to do the same thing as Egypt, and it was quickly dismantled and unable to organize as Egypt did. Now with Joyce and Nadia, please tell us, Nadia, what you have to say.
Thank you, Elizar and Samad, for briefing us on Egypt and Iran. Now Joyce and I are going to discuss the similarities and differences between the two countries. This contrasts against Iran, who in 2009 splintered into two separate groups, the revolutionaries and the internationalists. The revolutionaries pushed for change, but they wanted to take a more traditional Islamic approach and keep westernization and the rest of the world out of Iran. While the internationalists in Iran wanted more of a radical change, embracing westernization and wanting to reach out to the world for more technological advances. While Egypt and Iran are both Islamic-based countries, the biggest difference between the two is the tolerance of non-Islamic religions. As we saw in the 2011 revolution in Egypt, people from different social classes, races, and religions all gathered together to form one group to push change into their world. Now that we've discussed Iran and Egypt's differences, Joyce, can you tell us about their similarities?
Thank you, Nadia, for that. We also need to take into account that both Egypt and Iran, as Islamic countries, religion is deeply ingrained into their government. Islam provides in moral and social standards. They're the most similar of the Middle East countries, all even to their political power shift, 34 years ago for Iran, and 3 years ago as we saw it unfold for Egypt. As we experienced today in the 21st century, the Tahrir Square, where thousands of youths took the streets in Cairo, Egypt, and revolted against their government, making the transition quicker and faster than 34 years ago in Iran, where the loss of life and economical strain was harder on them. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helped you understand more the similarities and differences between Egypt and Iran.